fair weather God. You know, a farmer built a new barn on his property. And he had on the roof a weather vane that blowed whichever way the wind would. And it said at the bottom, God is love. On more than one occasion, someone passing by would see that weather vane and they would ask him, are you saying that God's love changes with the wind or with the time? And he said, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that no matter which way the wind blows, God's love never changes. A similar statement can be said in the fact that God is always faithful. God is always faithful. He doesn't change with the times. He doesn't change because man starts accepting things. God stays the same. And He is unchanging. And His faithful love endures forever. He doesn't change with the tides of life. The tide comes in and it goes out. God still remains the same. He is unchanging. He doesn't change at all. He is faithful. And the tides of life come in. So, Hebrews 13:8 tells us this. We see in Hebrews 13:8 it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. Throughout this entire psalm, here in Psalm 136, it says, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love endures forever. It never changes. God doesn't change with the times. His love is always the same. And throughout the entire psalm here, we can find the psalmist speaking of God's steadfast love. It's steadfast, it's unchanging, and it endures forever. Throughout the entire psalm, and perhaps your version would say this, His mercy endures forever. And really, isn't that what love is? It's mercy as well. Isn't love and mercy really about the same thing? His love is unchanging as well as His judgments, His grace. They are unchanging. Here in the passage in our lesson this morning, we're going to find a revelation of God's mercy, His grace, His love, and His judgments. They're all three going to be mentioned in the passage of our lesson this morning. You're going to see it. Okay? It never changes. And a compassionate side of God that affirms that He will follow through with what He says He will do. If God says He will do something, you can guarantee us He will do it. He will follow through with it. Hebrews 16 through 18 tells us this, for men indeed swear by the greater, an oath of confirmation, for them an end of dispute. Thus God determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of the promise the immutability of His counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that two immutable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, God can't lie, and that we might have a strong consolation who have fled for refuge, to lay hold of the hope that is set before us. Now we know what the hope set before us is. It's a life everlasting in His presence. A place where we don't have to endure pain and suffering, as we just read a very lengthy prayer list. That's the hope that's set before us. A far better life after this one is over. All made possible because of Jesus Christ. If God tells us He's going to do something, you can take it to the bank. It will happen. It will take place in His timing and not ours. And we are given evidence throughout the entire Scriptures how He has always followed through with what He said He would do. How He's always followed through with all of it. Today's lesson will revolve around Abraham and his nephew Lot. It will revolve around those two. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. It's first mentioned in the Scriptures of the genealogy of Abraham's brother in Genesis 12:27. This word's first mentioned. Lot followed Abraham and his house when they journeyed from the country of Ur to Canaan. Okay, he's with him. This was following a brief time in history. The family returned to an area south of where the tribe of Judah settles down. It was during this time that a dispute with the lands had taken place. Now we see this a lot today, how people argue over land. It's constant, it's unchanging, and from what I'm seeing here, it's been a time that way from all the way back in Genesis. Arguments and disputes over lands. But this is what's happened here. And it all took place and allowed Abraham had allowed Lot, his nephew, when this dispute was going on, to choose first of where they would settle. Okay? And this is taking place in Genesis 13, 8 through 9. That's where it took place. Now Lot having the first choice, of course, he does this. He does what we would all do. We look out and we say, oh, okay, I get the first choice. You're going to let me choose? Okay. I'm going to look and I'm going to kind of survey the area. And he looks out and he looks toward Sodom. Now at this time he saw the land was very lush. It was very green. It seemed to be a very pleasing place to settle and to be able to farm. The land was producible. It was very pleasing to the eye. And that's where Lot had set his focus. And Abraham had went the other way. He allowed Lot to choose. We find in the Scriptures that those who resided in Sodom, however, they were very wicked in nature. They were very wicked. There was a lot of homosexuality that took place. Adultery, lustful desires of the flesh. If you could think of it, it probably happened in Sodom. It was very wicked. And in this account of Lot, we can see that he was very deeply troubled from the events when he got there that were taking place. He was very deeply troubled by all this. But you have to keep in mind that no doubt Lot, now we have to think about who Abraham was, okay? And you can rest assured that no doubt that Lot had learned from his uncle. Okay? He had learned, he took some notes from his uncle. Abraham and the righteous standards that Abraham abided by. How he set them into place to live a life that was pleasing to God. You can take that into account. The New Testament gives an account of how Lot was greatly troubled about the wickedness that was taking place in Sodom. We see in 2 Peter 2, 6 through 7. He said, turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example of those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. Just before the kickoff of our lesson in chapter 19 of Genesis, we find an account that the Lord visits Abraham. He comes to him, he visits him. The Lord is one of three beings who came to Abraham. In Genesis 18, 1 through 3. It said, the Lord appeared to him in the terebinth of trees of Mamre, where he was sitting in the tent in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, behold, three men were standing by him. And he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground and said, my Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Do not pass me by. This was done confirming the promise that Sarah would conceive, after the promise that Sarah would conceive and bear a child. Okay? Then he set out towards Sodom. It was at this moment that God reveals his plan to Abraham, what he's going to do, because of the wickedness that was in Sodom at this time. God had seen it. He knew what was taking place, and he's going to reveal his plan, what he's going to do to Abraham. And I think he does it because he knows Lot is there. And no doubt Abraham loved his nephew. He loved him. Otherwise he wouldn't let him choose first which way he would go. No doubt we found the account that Lot was righteous. We just read in 2 Peter Lot was righteous. And that it troubled Lot because of the wickedness that was in the city. No doubt Lot was a righteous being because we're given an account of it. So he reveals his plan to Abraham, and he tells him his plans for Sodom due to their wickedness. In chapters 18, 20 through 22. We find in verse 22 that the men went away, and Abraham was left there standing with the Lord. And I can kind of picture him just kind of standing there, looking out over the city of Sodom. I can kind of just picture him standing there as they're looking out. And at this point we find an exchange of conversation between the Lord and Abraham. We see an exchange taking place here. Abraham knows what's going to take place. He knows what God's plan is. So a conversation begins to take place between the two. And Abraham begins to intercede and asking God not to do what he's going to set out to do, and to spare the righteous that are in Sodom and Gomorrah. How God will be able to relent. He asks him, please relent from his wrath and his judgment. If there were just 10 righteous people. Now we know how it goes. there's an exchange, and the number keeps getting lower and lower each time. He said, what if there's just 10? Just 10 righteous people. Will you relent? Will you relent them, Lord? And this is where we pick up in our lesson. So number one, we see this. Pass the slide. God's warning. We see God's warning here. In Genesis 19:1, it says this. Now 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose and he went to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. The 2 angels mentioned here are generally taken to be that of the 2 that found in the previously background scripture we just read this morning. We find also Lot is sitting at the gateway of the city. Now, a lot of people think this is maybe indicative that he has achieved a place of position, a place of rank that is within the city of Sodom here. They think he's achieved this as a man of rank. And in this gateway, it will be a place where important decisions were made for the city. That's where they'll be made at, kind of like a meeting room that you see, a place where people go and they try to make certain decisions for certain areas. It'd be a meeting room. So let's stop and observe here for a moment. Let's focus on a few things here. There's already been a progression of compromise here. There's already been a progression of compromise that we can see from Lot's side. Okay, some compromises he's made of it anyway, from Lot's side. He went from looking towards Sodom in Genesis 13:10 to pitching his tent towards Sodom in Genesis 13:12. Then to living in Sodom in Genesis 14:12, and losing everything. Now Lot sits at the gate of Sodom, indicating that he is a civic leader. That's what it's indicating here. And we also have seen how Lot was grieved by the wickedness of the city, the wicked things that were taking place in the city due to their vile actions. It grieved him because he was righteous, as we just read. However, because of his compromise, a few of his family and none of his friends were obedient. Compromise destroyed his testimony, and it destroys theirs as well. If you compromise on something, and people can see you kind of going with the way the wind blows, kind of like the weather vane we read about this morning, it will destroy your testimony as a Christian. It will destroy it, as opposed to what it would if you stood firm. And it destroyed his testimony. As Lot confronts the 2, he insists that they stay the night with him, because without a doubt, he is fully aware of the wickedness that was in the city, how unsafe this city was for anybody to be there, and how it was infected, and how it would be better for them to stay with him instead of being out on the street. At first, they declined. No, we're not going to do it. Not going to do it, Lot. But he is so persistent in them staying with him. They eventually agree and say, okay, yeah, all right, we're going to stay. We'll stay with you. Okay? They eventually agree, and this hospitality for the visitors was nothing out of the ordinary at this time. It was the norm. And however we sense it and see it, and in this message we can sense a little bit of urgency here expressed by Lot. And expressed the desire that he stay with them was very real. In the next few verses we find this in Genesis 19:4-5. It says this. Now before they lay down, the men of the city of Sodom, both old and young, all people from every quarter, surrounded the house. And they called out to Lot and said to him, where are the men who come to stay the night with you? Bring them out to us, so that we may know them carnally. Okay? Now this is the wicked city. They'd seen that the men had went in Lot's house. So they're out there beating on the door. Come on, bring them out to us. Bring them out here. So we can know them carnally or sexually. We find here in this statement that the people of Sodom had clearly come to want to have sexual relations with these 2 men that were in Lot's house. It is here and it's seen clear that these citizens of Sodom had succumbed to sexual homosexuality, abuse, rape, and they wanted to handle these 2 visitors. And it is a shocking demonstration of the depravity that the city has come to. The depravity of it all. And if you will read on the next few verses, it might be just as shocking to see how Lot is willing to even give up his $2 instead of the two gentlemen that he has in his house. He's willing to hand them over instead of the two gentlemen that he has in his house. He don't want to give them up, so he's willing to hand over his daughters. It may be very well indicating that he is fully aware of who they are, and that he has been wrong himself for handling and giving in, conforming to the life. Not so much as conforming, but open and willingly accepting the life that was going on around him, for not taking a stand against the wickedness of the city. We understand a little more when we consider the low place of women as well during this time. Now, I'm not trying to be derogatory here, but the women in the pre-Christian world and the very high place of any guest in your home, the guest would take precedence over any of the women that were in the house. They would. It was understood a guest will be protected more than your own family when you have them in your household at this time. Okay, so we have already seen how Lot has lost his credibility by conforming or turning a blind eye to the wickedness that surrounds him. And all this has taken place, and these were behind two locked doors. The mob outside were breaking down the door, ready to come into the home. Now, could you imagine what would have taken place if the men had been out on the street? Could you imagine what would have taken place? Well, we're about to see some things that take place anyway. And the men are in Lot's house at this time. We're about to see what's going to take place. Lot being outside of his own door at this moment, the two men reach outside and they pull Lot back into the house. Say, get in here. Apparently they already know what's happening. They can see the mob rising. They can see it building, and the tension's building in the mob, and they know what's going to take place. So they grab Lot and they jerk him back in and say, get in here. They get him right off the street. And it is then that they struck every person outside the door blind. They struck them all blind. Those outside the doorway of the house, both small, great, and they became weary of trying to find the door, to still eagerly get in with them. I don't think Lot truly understood the magnitude of the situation he was placed in here. A lot of times we place ourselves in situations we don't truly understand the magnitude of what's taking place. We can't see the big picture, and a lot of times someone that from the outside looking in, so to speak, can see what's taking place. And these two men that are inside the door know what's happening. Lot, this could be just a normal for him because he's seen it so much. So, they don't understand the magnitude of the situation. The two that pulled him back in the house could clearly see what was going to happen. And it must have taken a great and perhaps a supernatural strength to do what the angels did at the door, to pull him back inside. We can see, however, we do see a supernatural event take place where he struck everyone out blind, or the angels struck those blind that were outside the door, to keep them from finding them. Obviously, the work of striking the men blind was supernatural. Now this mob had a physical blindness appropriate to the moral blindness because of the wickedness that had infiltrated the city already. We see in Genesis 19:15, it says this: when the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, hurrying, saying, arise, take your wife, your two daughters, who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of this city. Now the angels knows what's coming. They know what's going to take place. God's about to arrange judgment on Sodom. They already know this. Okay? Too much of Lot's heart, however, was still in Sodom. A lot of his heart was still there. So he was not all that anxious to leave the city right away. He wasn't like, all right, let's go. No. He wasn't like that. There was a lack of urgency to do the things that he was told to do. And this lack of urgency to do the things that God mentions is a common sign of compromise and backslidden conditions. The lack of urgency to do what's right and what God tells us to do is a very common sign in our backslidden state. It's very common. How many of us today are still so anxious to leave this, or not so anxious rather, still kind of hold back We're not really anxious to leave the sin that once ruled our lives. How many of us today are still unwilling to let go of that sin that separates us and alienates us from God? We want to hold on to it. We don't want to give it up. We keep falling back into His traps over and over and over. And then you go to God, here I am again, God. I'm confessing this sin again, God. I'm sorry, God. Because we're unwilling to let it go. That sin alienates us from God and His grace. And that sin will deliver us into His judgment if we're unwilling to give it up, as opposed to receiving His grace from His coming judgment. For those who are listening, it's my prayer this. Here's my prayer for everyone listening. I want you to sense the urgency that God is extending with His mercy here to you, in your everyday actions, your everyday life, and that you can see the consequences of those who continually reject, cast aside His extended mercy as He waits and as He stands at the door and knocks for you to let Him in. So let go of your worldly desires and begin trusting in God's plan that He has laid before us, so we can avoid the coming wrath of His judgment. Because it's coming. He's already said it was coming. And it's impossible for God to lie. The coming wrath of His judgment on all who refuse to obey the gospel. There's a sense of urgency seen here, and this is throughout the entire gospel for us to obey. Lot was in the worst of all places. He had too much of the world to be happy in the Lord, and he had too much of the Lord to be happy in the world. He was kind of right in the middle, stuck between a rock and a hard place. That's where he was at. Lot hesitated, but first when the angels urged him to go, then they said, "You got to go." They urged him, so they pressed on. Genesis 19:16 says this. And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand. So there's an urgency here. He said, "Oh, well, if you're going to hang out, I'm just going to take you with me." So they took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters. The Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So you can see, hey, I'm going to hang around here for a little bit. No. So they took him by the hand and led him out of the city. Notice the verse here that God being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. God is merciful to us as well. He extends His mercies every day. His mercies are new every morning, as the psalmist will tell us. His mercies are extended to us daily. And sometimes He has to grab hold of our hands and say, "No, I can't let you go that way. I can't let you go that far. And I can't let you hang around here long. I'm going to have to bring you with me." His mercies are new. And He constantly calls out to those who are disobedient and constantly refuse to accept Him. He constantly calls out His extended mercies. However, a time will come where His mercies upon those who are disobedient, continue to reject Him, will come to an end, and the Lord will cease to extend it, and then it will be too late. So we see in Genesis 19:17, it came to pass when they had brought them outside that He said, "Escape for your life, do not look behind you, nor stay where you are, or anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest you be destroyed." The simple instruction here. The simple thing they're told. Don't look back. Go. Don't look back. It isn't entirely clear why they are not to look back. They don't reveal that to us. They say, don't look back. Perhaps it's because they've become in such shock and a state of awe. They've been frozen with fear and amazement. At the same time, God's wrath. However, whatever the cause or the reasoning behind them telling them, don't look back, today we as Christians can take a great lesson from that account. We can take a great lesson from this account as a Christian today, or as a disciple today. Not looking back. When you let go of the world, don't look back. Let it go. Don't look back at it. Remember, as we covered last week in the message, how Christ stated this the following. He said these statements in Luke 9:62. Anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God? We also see this in Proverbs 26:11. As a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Don't look back. Let it go. Whatever the case may be, we're called from this life, that sin that God has called us from, it will lead to our judgment from God, the wrath from God, rather than into a new life of His mercy and grace. And when you look back, you're setting yourself up for disaster and to fall right back into the same old temptations, the same old struggles, the same old thing that causes you every day to say, here I am again, God. The same old sin. Why? Because you looked back. Genesis 19:18-19. Then Lot said to them, please know, my lords, indeed now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. In Lot's terminology here, he addressed the angels the same way as he did when he first encountered them at the gate. This was simply a term of respect, and it does not necessarily imply the acknowledgement of divinity and worship, that he's worshiping these angels, because he's not. Remember when they fell down the ground and began to worship the angels, he said, see that you don't do that in Revelation? When they fell down to worship the angel, when John fell down to worship him, and he said, no, see that you don't do that. I'm not worthy of your worship. Stand up, don't worship me. His response to the angel's plea, leave the city, because of the destruction that is about to befall upon him. It can leave us somewhat confused, if you will. It can leave some confusion here. We see that there are 3 instances that he has been warned, and yet Lot himself has urged his son-in-laws to leave, and he openly admits they've been a recipient of God's favor, and it is now here that he is in fear of going where God tells him to go. He's afraid. He's already seen that he's been delivered from the destruction and the judgment here that's coming upon the city, and now he's stuck with fear because of what may befall upon him in the mountains. How many times does God open a door for us and still yet we refuse to act because we are in such fear of walking through it? The same thing is said, and it happens to Lot in this passage. It happens here. He's afraid to go. He's already been delivered, but he's afraid to go. Afraid of what else lies around the next curve, the next bend in the road. He's afraid. He's in fear. And now the city that he was referencing to here is the city called Zoar. And it was a relatively small town. It was very small in size. It wasn't large at all. And consider the irony here. Lot is more fearful of disaster that could happen than one is clearly going to happen very soon. He's more in fear of what will happen than the one that's already taking place behind him. He's afraid. He knows what's going to happen here. He's afraid of what will happen when he goes there. Lot's suggestion of an alternative place of refuge. But Lot makes the point, however, that the town is very small. Perhaps Lot has the attitude that a town that is small in size can be sin-filled, or that the small place with sin can be overlooked by the Lord. Abraham has already been negotiating with God and has been into consideration. Always negotiations. Now Lot wants to add some amendments to that negotiation, if you will. He wants to throw some stuff in there of his own. However, the negotiation that fell between God and Abraham is a far cry from the one Lot is now imposing to the angels. It's a far cry. It's totally different. As Lot seems to be looking out for number one rather than looking out for the best interest of the others. So, as he's looking out for self-preservation, we see this in Genesis 19:21. And he said to them, see, I have favored you concerning this thing, also, in that I will not overthrow this city which you have spoken. Okay, so they're getting some assurance here. Nope, I won't do it. I won't overthrow it. Okay? I won't overthrow that city that you've spoken of. It is here that we can find the angel has agreed to Lot's request and is able to flee to the town that he has desired to go to, and that he would not overthrow that town that Lot seeks after. Genesis 19:22. Says this, "Hurry and escape, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. Here we find it's an urgency for him to move out and dodge hanging around the rambling of that judgment. And it's still about to come. And that will occur, it will not occur until Lot has reached the town. It's not going to take place. This town is called Zoar. It means in the Hebrew, small or insignificant. The irony of this all, here's the whole ironic thing of this. Okay? Even though Lot requested to go to this town, he will later leave that town and return to the mountains where the angels had suggested for him to go in the first place. He will come back as the dog returning back to its vomit, to where the angels told him to go in the first place. We see that in Genesis 19:30. Now, in Genesis 19:23, we see this. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. So number 2, we see God's judgment here. God's judgment is about to take place. It's about to all unfold here. Every bit of it. Genesis 19:24-25 says this. "Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew the cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt." Today, many people feel that the cities are buried under the seas or the waters of the Dead Sea. That's where a lot of people think it's at. We don't know. We're not given an account of where the city's at. We know that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah both. And the testament of their message itself is demonstrating God's judgment, His deliverance through His mercy, His grace. So He extended mercy and grace to Lot and his family by allowing them to come out. As Abraham was interceding for them, God demonstrates His mercy and His grace in Christ as our intercessor this morning, sitting at the right hand of the Father, making intercessions for us. This morning, the bones and the story of the dead cry out from the ground, the dust of the earth, to heed the word of the living God. Be obedient to His word, lest you fall into His judgment and into His wrath, is what they're doing. And before this destruction, and before the city was plagued with all the wickedness and all of its sin, all of its hostility, Sodom was unbelievably beautiful. It was productive. It had lush garden life. Yet this great privilege and blessing did not turn their hearts toward God. We know it's beautiful. Lot looked at it, and that's where he wanted to go because it was lush, it was green, and it was beautiful. So that's where he set his focus on when Abraham allowed him to choose. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah saw more power, grace, and mercy of God than any of the other people in that region. They had been delivered from the ruin of delivered from ruin by God's work through Abraham. They heard the testimony of Melchizedek and saw the example of Melchizedek and Abraham. Verse 26, but his wife looked back behind him. She became a pillar of salt. Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt because she looked back. She looked back at the coming wrath and the judgment. After the angels had specifically told them, don't look back. Keep going and stay forward. Remember, the Apostle Paul tells us to run this race with endurance and to press on toward the goal. And when you're pressing on toward the goal, you're not turning around and looking the opposite way. You're looking forward ahead to the prize that's set before you. After the angels told her not to look back behind her, she looked back. Some think she lingered behind because she was caught up in the cataclysm. somehow of the destruction taking place. But it was probably a unique judgment of God on her for the state of her heart. That would have been her love for Sodom. The regret for its destruction. Shown by her action, looking back, she was turned into a pillar of salt. What Sodom? What is the Sodom that's in your life? What is that city that keeps calling you to look back to it? What is that city that tells you to turn around and calls you to look back? The message we can take from this morning is flee from it, let it go, and don't look back. Because when you look back, it leads to destruction and God's judgment filled with His wrath. Is what it leads to. Within the message of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah this morning, it is a very simple, clear message. And within this message is a display of one of the divine attributes of the living God, and that is this: God's mercy. We see the divine attribute of His amazing mercy here in this message this morning. Genesis 19:29, it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when He overthrew the cities which Lot dwelt. He remembered what He told Abraham. He remembered, yeah, okay, I'll let you get Lot and family out. When the Scripture says that God remembered, it's not referencing to something like He had ever forgotten. God don't forget. God's all knowing. He's not going to say, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. I forgot about that promise I gave you. No. When the Scriptures is referencing to what God says, when it says God remembered, it means an implication that He is drawing attention to it. He's looking at it. He's placing focus on that. It's not that He forgot. It's that He's committed to acting upon His promise and what He says He will do. That's what it's meant. We'll find later God fulfilling His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in Exodus 2:24, where He will provide deliverance for all the people. In a sense, the same thing is intended when God's people are commanded to remember His acts in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Verse 29b tells us that we brought out Lot, or that tells us that brought Lot out. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Exodus 29, or verse 29b tells us that brought out Lot in the midst of the overthrow. He brought him out when he overthrew the cities which Lot had dwelt. The idea of Abraham's intercession here resulted in Lot's rescue from destruction. The Lord didn't find 10 righteous people in that city that day. So He did not spare it. But He did find one. So, mercy and judgment. We see mercy and judgment. Today, when you hear the names of Sodom and Gomorrah, people immediately begin thinking of God's wrath and judgment, the wickedness that filled that city, the cruelness, everything that had taken place. They think of God's judgment, His vengeance, His wrath, destruction. However, in this message this morning together, we also find that God was a merciful God. God was one with mercy and grace and love. Just as He is today to all who need and obey His commands. However, just as Lot's wife fell into disobedience through temptation, we also must find and know that God will fulfill that which He has said He would do. As long as we're disobedient, the time will come when His judgment will come forth. He will do what He says He will do. If we reject His words and disobey His commands, we'll also fall into the same judgment that Lot's wife did. We find that God never once lost patience with Lot. As much as he kept trying to hang on and keep trying to beg for time, oh, let me do this, let me do that. God never lost patience with him. He stayed with him. He never lost his patience. However, He did continue to help him. In Lot's character altogether, we find flaws, We find flaws in our character today as well, and I'm so thankful that we serve a loving and merciful and a patient God who is patiently waiting, patiently helping, patiently listening to us as we lift our prayers up, patiently listening to us as we intercede for those we want to come to Christ, those who have fallen away, and is patiently holding back His judgment, giving more time for them to accept Him as Lord and Savior. Where do you stand this morning? Behind the enemy lines? In the line of fire, perhaps? Or are you within the safe confines of His mercy and His continual grace? Because that's what all this, the whole message here from Sodom and Gomorrah to Paul around. That's what it can all be said about, is those who are in His continued mercy and grace this morning.